Anyway, I want to take a step back. You know, after this terrorist attack in New York yesterday, watching the kind of hilarious coverage, and I don't mean hilarious in the sense that people died, which obviously wasn't hilarious, just the stupidity of the coverage. I just wanted to take a step back. You know, they put this guy, Sayfullo Saipov, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, who cares? They put the complaint out against him, and in the complaint, it says, in interviews with law enforcement officials, Mr. Saipov said he felt good about what he had done, killing 8 people and wounding so many people, and he asked to display an Islamic State flag in his hotel room. And, you know, I think they should let him, and I know where they can plant the flagpole, too. You know, I think that'd be a great idea. But, you know, you hear that, and you know at the same time, I mean, I'm being snarky about it because of otherwise I just have to go there and strangle him myself. But like I'm being snarky about it. But you know that people are mourning today. People have lost. You know, somebody who went off. A lot of these guys were from Argentina who were killed. You know, people who went off on a holiday and they're not coming back. And this guy's happy. You know, he's a happy guy, which is evil. I mean, this is evil. And you know, I was thinking about these philosophies. Because it's easy to focus on when it's an Islamist attack. It's easy to focus on that. But you think about all these philosophies, Islamism, radical Islam, we'll call it. And I know there are a lot of people who say it's all Islam. And I was talking yesterday about all Islam. But the guys who do this stuff are radical Islamists. And you think about that, and you think about these white supremacists who, the guy in Charlottesville drove a car into an innocent woman. It's basically a Nazi. You think about these Antifa people who the press treats easily because they agree with their basic premises. But, you know, you're putting on masks and you're beating people up because you disagree with them. You're a fascist. So you can call yourself anti-fascist, but you're a fascist. You're an anti-fascist fascist. And all of them are basically have one thing in common, which is the premise that what they are offering, the world that they are offering, and the world that they are defending is so superb, is so perfect, is so paradisical that it is worth killing you or beating you or just smushing you, crushing you in some way to ensure that that world comes into being. And it's a child's view of the world. I mean, I think all of us have this. I mean, have you ever had the fantasy? I've had the fantasy where you get godlike powers and then what would you do to the world? I always end up killing people. I always end up killing me. I always think, well, first I'd have to erase those guys because they're the problem. Because, you know, when you're fantasizing, you're kind of tapping into that childlike thing. And I really do believe that the media and the left, I know there are childlike thinkers on the right, but I think on the left, because they own so much of the communication machinery in this country, including the academies, including show business, including the news business, that they turn us into children, the way they talk about things. So it's always, you know, and why do they do it? It's always their philosophy versus hate. So you are for gay marriage or you hate gay people. There's no complex idea about the role of marriage in society. Never mind any of that. You're either for the government controlling all the energy supplies or you want everybody to die. You know, that's always the thing where the Republicans just want people to die. You're either for government-run health care. You want all of your health care controlled by the government, so the government has the power of life and death over you and has the power to make decisions about how you behave, or you just want people to die. You want little children like Jimmy. You want to see Jimmy Kimmel crying and little children, pardon me, who can't get health care. You know, so they reduce the arguments to childlike arguments. And why do they do this? I seriously believe it's not just because they believe your children. They do believe your children. But I seriously think that one of the things about the left is their essential philosophy has failed. Their essential socialist philosophy failed with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I know that by the time the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of the left had disowned it because of Stalin, but they bought into it in the first place. The New York Times is still running this series, Red Century, in which they tell you how much better things were in these murder. I mean, this is a philosophy that has resulted in at least 100 million deaths. 100 million deaths, probably closer to 150 million deaths. Why? Because the world that they're offering, the socialist world that they're offering, is so wonderful, so perfect, so paradisical that it is worth what's a few farmers being starved, what's a few people being shot in the back of the head. You know, that's a small price to pay for this perfect world they're bringing in. And that philosophy has failed, and we saw it fail. Our whole entire last century was just that philosophy failing. We see it failing now in South America. Everywhere it goes, it failed. And all they can do is point to this magical Scandinavia that they make up, which, by the way, has repealed most of its socialist measures. What they do have, some of them, they have very high taxes. They have free markets, but then when you make a lot of money off their free markets or off the oil they in the case of Norway, off their oil, they tax you very highly, so they have a lot of services and goods and vacations and things like that. And of course, all those communities are very homogenous. They're all the same, you know. People tend to, in those communities, tend to all have the same values, same background, same bloodlines and all this stuff. And they're all protected by the evil capitalists here in the United States, because without the United States military, every single one of them would be part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Every single one of them would have been conquered at some point by a mightier, more imperialistic power than ours if we hadn't protected them. So we're spending the money that protects them. We're often spending the money on research and development that develops new drugs that they don't pay for, that we pay for with our high drug prices. So it really is not a fair system, because, you know, we are taking on a lot of the responsibilities, and then they complain about the fact that we are not socialist like they are. Socialism has failed everywhere, and so all that they're left with is grouping us into these identities, as identity politics, grouping, you know, you're black and therefore your interests have to do with your blackness. You're Islamic, therefore your interests have to do with not having people criticize radical Islam. You're a woman and therefore you're against men. All it has to do is pitting us against one another. The left doesn't want this country to be more what they call diverse, which is they don't want us to have more different colored faces because they love mankind. They want us to be more diverse, so there are more interest groups that they can turn against each other to keep us from noticing that their policies have failed. And so when you have a policy that fails, all you can sell is this hatred, and in order to get that hatred going, you need simplicity. You got to pit the blacks against the cops. Nobody ever says, well, wait, yeah, maybe there's a bad cop in your neighborhood. Maybe there's some bigoted cops in your neighborhood, but who's protecting you? When the crime comes down, when your kids are gangsters, when you've got gangsters on the street, who's going to protect you from those people? Nobody wants to have those kind of conversations. And when it comes to Islam, that is the problem. Listen, it is dangerous to start attacking people's religions. It is dangerous to start criticizing people's religions. All through the Middle Ages with the Jews, you know, there were a lot of people before it became a racial issue. It was a religious issue. It was that the Jews didn't, you know, it's like Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. The Jews don't have mercy. They just stick to the law. And we wonderful Christians, we have mercy and we rise above the law, which of course, you know, we're all people. We all suck. You know, we're all sinful people. So it's like that. There's nothing to that. And it's also a simplistic, stupid view of Judaism. But it can be very, very dangerous to criticize people's religions, because most people in a religion just want to pray. They want to have a communion with God, and they're not blowing people up. They're not doing that stuff. But on the other hand, this is complexity. This is how complexity works. On the other hand, ideas matter. If ideas matter, why are we, you know, if the ideas don't matter, why are we doing this? Why are we talking? Why are we listening? Why are we reading? Why are we thinking if ideas don't matter? Of course they matter. This country is built on ideas. And you do have to question, even though we believe so deeply in freedom of religion and multiplicity of religion and diversity of religion, even though we believe in all those things, you do have to question whether a series of ideas is antithetical to the creed of your nation. You know, this is the thing. So all of this stuff is complex. I always like to use the gay issue because I'm kind of on the left about this. I believe everybody should be left alone. I think that everybody should be left alone. I think a government that can bother you in your bedroom is too strong a government. But I understand when people talk about marriage. I think that's a reasonable argument. And I think two people should be able to sit down and talk about that without their businesses being attacked, without their ideas. You know, Clarence Thomas, Laura Ingraham has her new show on Fox, and congratulations to her. Laura has been incredibly nice to me over the years. I have a very funny story about my first interview I gave with Laura Ingraham. Should I tell that? Yeah, why not? It's just quick, quick diversion. I had just managed to try to convince the people in New York that I could sell books to conservatives by getting on conservative radio and on TV. And at one point I said to one of my agents, who was one of the smartest women I ever met in the business, I would learn something from her every time I talked to her. And I said to her, I think I can get on Hannity. And she said, who's Hannity? And this is recently. This is not long ago. And so that's the mindset of the publishing business back then. And you couldn't get through to them. And so I met Laura Ingraham at a party at Joel, the guy who did 24. It was at the 24 studios. Not Joel Schumacher. Joel. Oh my gosh! But it'll come back to me. But I met. They had a party there, and I met Laura, and she said, "Why don't you come on my show and talk about your book, and we'll try and sell your book." And I said, great. And I was so excited. I actually lost my voice. I got like laryngitis because it was not just the interview that I was happy about. It was that I could finally convince the people in New York that people like Laura could sell my book. And Laura is a very, she's, like I said, she's been lovely to me, but she's very brusque, she can talk very tough and all this stuff. So I get on and I was selling, I think it was Dynamite Road, one of my detective stories, and I'm selling it to her, and I'm on the phone with her, and I'm doing this interview, and the build up to the interview was tough. Getting there was tough. I had to get my voice back. I had to score some antibiotics so I could get over my laryngitis. It was a big deal. So now I'm on this interview, and I'm doing the interview, and I start talking, and I say, I keep doing what they tell you to do when you do an interview, which is keep mentioning the name of the book. And I got about 2 minutes into this interview, and they broke for a commercial, and Laura came on, and she said, "Stop mentioning the name of the book. You sound like a used car salesman." And I was so terrified. I just was like, okay. And I kind of stumbled through the rest of the interview. The book went up the list on Amazon, and I actually did convince the people it actually worked. I convinced the people in New York that this was an important thing, and it really changed my relationship with them and with the media. Anyway, Laura Ingraham had Clarence. I thought that was funny. When Laura Ingraham yells at you, she really yells at you. So when she had Clarence Thomas, big score, she got, because Justice Thomas doesn't like going on, and he was talking about the fact that we have lost the idea of multiplicity of ideas. But let's play this cut. This is the cut about the number 15, cut 15.
I grew up at a time when I was exposed to just wonderful range of ideas in a segregated library, in a black library, the Carnegie Library in Savannah. I mean, you might read George Schuyler in the Pittsburgh Courier, or you might read a book by, Ralph Ellison or Baldwin, or you might read one by Richard Wright. So you might read something about Booker T. Washington, but then W.B. Du Bois. So you had this range of ideas. And I think we're getting quite comfortable in our society limiting ideas and exposure to ideas. And maybe that's a symptom of it, I don't know. But I don't think it's good for the next generation and the people who will be learning. I mean, I think I learned a tremendous amount in the Carnegie Library simply from being exposed to a range of ideas.
It's just an important point, because when you look at, for instance, on the right, let's pick on the right for a minute. When you look at Donald Trump does a lot of stuff, as I keep saying, that I don't like. And every time I mention the fact that he does stuff I don't like, I don't think the president should be bullying people. I don't think he should be calling them names. I think that is a moral hazard. Yet he's accomplishing so much good stuff. If he gets this tax thing, I mean, wiping out ISIS, getting rid of regulations, the judges he's appointing, all this stuff. It's complicated. It's complicated. And every time I say, well, it's complicated, he sometimes doesn't do the right thing, and I want to criticize him for that because I do not want to sign on to it. People yell at me, but it's complicated. Like, life is complicated. And then there's the other guys, the never-Trumpers on the right, who every time I point out what he's doing, they say, well, he's not responsible for that. He didn't defeat ISIS. It's like, yes, he did. He gave Mattis himself said he gave him the go-ahead to destroy them, and they did destroy them. And I think that this is like, you can't take the credit away from the guy, and you do have to point out the things that he does that would that kind of can soil the rest of us. I mean, life is complicated. So with this religion thing, look, I don't want to bother Muslim people, obviously, peaceful Muslim people. I don't want to bother them. But I think when Trump is talking about immigration. He's right. And you can't just say, well, freedom of religion, freedom of religion. If they believed in human sacrifice, we wouldn't let them in. And if they believe that in Sharia law, we shouldn't let them in. Those are two things that are antithetical to our way of life. It's not that Obama thing, who we are. We're the same as everybody else. It's nothing about who we are. It's what we believe, because what we believe ultimately is what fashions our society. And so we need complex adult conversations. And I think the press cuts us off from that.